What's up, Face Off fanatics? This is Anthony Servino of the Face Off Sports Network with my top week 4 waiver wire pickups. We're going to get right into the action, and we're going to start with Bucky Irving. And if you know me, if you know this show, I've been in on Bucky Irving all off season long saying, hey, watch out for Rachaad White, not the most efficient runner in the world. And if Bucky Irving is a competent back, and we've heard him be talked up through the offseason program, training camp, and the preseason, he starts flashing in week 1, and all of a sudden we are at a point where there could be a workload distribution shift, and it could continue to shift in the favor of Bucky Irving and out of favor of Rachaad White as the season progresses. And I think it really begins to heat up in week 4. Bucky Irving rostered 35% roughly of Yahoo leagues and continues to impress as an overall runner. He's outrushed Rachaad White for the first 3 games of the year in terms of rushing yards. White continues to play inefficient football when he gets those early down running back touches. Still a good receiver out of the backfield. But as a runner, this is now a full season last year and a few games into this season where he just can't get out of his own way. Bucky Irving, 6.2 yards per carry. Rachaad White, 2.1. That is not good. In fact, if this continues, if the inefficiency continues, Bucky Irving is going to be the guy in this backfield. You absolutely positively need to roster Bucky Irving if he's available in your league. I would even say he's a buy low, get ahead of the market, get him now, because if he becomes the guy, if he begins to really pop, he's going to be priced out. And same thing with Rachaad White. If you have Rachaad White, I would get out from under Rachaad White. Try to sell him high if he scores again this week. You need to find a way to move off of this guy because Bucky Irving right now, 11.4 PPR points against Denver in week 3, 9 of 70 on the ground, and 3 of 3 targets for 14 yards. So he's also eating into that Rachaad White receiving down work a little bit. Even in week 1, we had 9.6 PPR points, 9 for 62 on the ground, another efficient day, 2 of 3 targets for another 14 as receiver. So Bucky Irving has hit the score, but playing super efficient football as a runner, he is a must add in all fantasy formats. Let's go to my next running back. We talked about him a little bit last week, and it's Braelon Allen, rostered in 36% of leagues. And I was telling people to pick Braelon Allen up going into Thursday Night Football last week. But I was telling you, hey, I don't know if I'm starting him. This is Brees's backfield. He's a contingent addition. And what that means, a contingent addition, he's contingent, like his fantasy upside is contingent to a potential, knock on wood, Brees Hall injury. But he's also one of the most valuable cuffs in fantasy football, almost like a Jordan Mason, that type of ceiling and upside, if anything did happen to Brees Hall. Knock on wood for the sake of everybody, for the sake of Brees, for the sake of Jet fans, for the sake of my bankroll. We can't have anything happen to Brees Hall. But when it comes to Braelon Allen, he had a larger role in week 3 than I thought. Now, a lot of it, the Jets kicked the Patriots' ass, and a lot of that could have been garbage time work. But if you watched the game, Braelon Allen was involved early. Again, 36% of leagues, he's available everywhere. And Brees is going to be the guy, and he's going to continue to be the guy. But if the Jets start playing Jet football, new Jet football, Salah's a very good DC. Aaron Rodgers, we know what he can do. They have weapons. They have personnel to be a dominant football team. And I get it was New England, but Aaron Rodgers is starting to look comfortable. And you give that type of a defense a lead to play with. Remember how shut down they were last season when the defense was practically winning games for Zach Wilson. You give that type of a defense a lead. Like, don't think about those old Raven defenses with Ray Lewis when they won that Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer. They were happy to have a couple points on the board, and we'll do our job. This defense is going to step up. I think Aaron Rodgers becoming more comfortable. The cobwebs are now shaken off. This Jets team's going to be a force. which means we're going to probably see a lot of Braelon Allen. And again, last week made the most of his opportunities, 14 touches, even saw a red zone opportunity. And Braelon Allen, again, made the most of it. 9.8 PPR points, 55 yards rushing, 3 of 3 targets for 13 as a receiver. Obviously, Tennessee pops for almost 20, gets 2 touchdowns. We don't expect that every week. But, for Braelon Allen to get 9.8 PPR on 14 touches, couple of receptions, and he's playing a limited snap share, right? Brees had 50, Braelon 21. When he's on the field, he's being utilized. So absolutely pick up Braelon Allen. Jets get Denver this week. Denver played well last week in that win over Tampa, but we know the more efficient running teams are going to get theirs. And Breece Hall, this is going to be a big game for Breece Hall. Remember, a couple of years ago, his rookie year, he busted his ACL against the Denver Broncos. So big game here for the Jets, for Breece Hall. And this could be another one if the Jets pummel Denver, and I think they can, despite how Denver looked against Tampa, that we're going to see another game out of Braelon Allen where he's giving us decent fantasy production. With the way fantasy is right now, you might be able to use him in your flex spot. Let's start moving this along. Cam Akers. And Cam Akers is a true contingent upside player right now. This was a weird game for the Texans last week. Because in theory, Cam Akers could have had more work, but this game was out of reach early. Minnesota controlled this game. And normally when it's a close game, we've seen this year especially, or when Houston's leading, they love to run the football. Look at Joe Mixon's workload so far when healthy. Cam Akers only 9 for 21 on the ground, 1 of 1 for 8 yards as a receiver and scoring his touchdown, 9.9 PPR points. But he dominated the snap share. He had 27. Actually, I'm wrong. He didn't dominate. He had 27 to Dario Ogunbowale's 26. I was looking at the wrong numbers. But Ogunbowale didn't really touch the ball. Probably used more of a blocking back because he didn't touch the ball as a runner and caught 2 of 2 targets for 28 yards. So despite the fact that Dario Ogunbowale almost had a full split with Cam Akers, when it comes to the running back touches, Cam Akers dominated. And he made the most of it, scoring a touchdown, just under 10 PPR points. If Joe Mixon comes back, then Cam Akers, you can't use him in fantasy. If Joe Mixon misses another game with the ankle, or if the reports say, hey, he's going to be active with limitations, then I do think we can use Cam Akers against Jacksonville. And we know Jacksonville, this is a team going in the wrong direction. They got smoked by Buffalo. They've been getting smoked all year. They can't stop anybody on the ground. So Cam Akers is going to absolutely positively be in play. And listen, I get this is a must-have game for Houston. They need to bounce back strong. This should be a game where they're looking at the schedule. Hey, Joe Mixon, maybe we don't need you this week. We should be able to beat Jacksonville without you. I'm picking up Cam Akers. And even if Mixon comes back, don't drop Akers. Don't fade Akers. Keep him in your bench. It's a long season. Anything can happen to Mixon. They could go into a more, a little bit of an even workload, or maybe they use Cam Akers enough to where he can give you fantasy value on a week-to-week basis, because he is a pretty good running back when healthy. Let's go to our next player, and that is Alexander Mattison. And this is one I wish I could have back. Zamir White. I was in on Zamir White at cost, thought he was going to be the guy, and couldn't have been more wrong. Now, while Zamir White is still getting some workload, Alexander Mattison is beginning to pass him on the depth chart. And we saw a glimpse of that this week, 25 snaps to 14. And we know the Raiders absolutely got smoked by the Panthers. Zamir White dominated the snaps in week 2, and week 1, Mattison dominated again. So it looks like a true timeshare. They're going to run with the hot hand, but the hot hand is Alexander Mattison. Now, if you look at the statistics, it wasn't good, and it wasn't good for anybody in the Raiders. But Mattison, out of his 25 offensive snaps on Sunday, 3 for 7 as a runner, scores a touchdown to salvage his fantasy day, also caught all 3 of his targets for 37, solid 13.4 PPR points. In fact, he also had 16.2 in week 1. He has actually scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. he's a usable fantasy asset. And I don't know if I'm cutting Zamir White because we did spend a single-digit round draft capital on him, and this is going to be a team that they want to run the football. And Zamir White, let's call it what it is. He's getting workload. He's had at least 10 touches in all 3 games. Now, 10 this past week being the fewest, but this was a game that they had to bail on the run. In the past 2, he's had from weeks 1 and 2. Weeks 1, he had 15. Week 2, he had 12. So he's being used. He's just not cashing in. In fact, Alexander Mattison is getting those red zone opportunities. Those red zone opportunities start going to Zamir White. We're having a different conversation. Until then, Alexander Mattison, who is available in 31, he's only rostered in 31% of leagues. You got to go pick him up. Let's start going to the wide receivers, and we're going to start with Jauan Jennings. And Jauan Jennings absolutely went ballistic in week 3, 31% rostered. He needs to be rostered everywhere because the 49ers this year, we know that they're dealing with the injury bug, and they're getting bit by the injury bug really bad. And I'm not going to tell you, hey, Jauan Jennings, you're going to put him in your lineup. It's New England. He's going to get you another 3 touchdowns. Remember this past week, 12 targets, 11 receptions, 175 yards, 3 scores. That's not happening again, folks. And if it does, great. But if you're, banking on sticking in Jauan Jennings because the Patriots and he's going to go for 46 PPR points again, that's probably not happening. But is he going to be a usable fantasy asset? I'm going to say yes. Number 1, the matchup. Number 2, Debo is probably going to be out. And if George Kittle misses another game, we're going to be looking at the same opportunity distribution. And the opportunity distribution this week with no Debo, Kittle, or CMC. It was Mason. It was Jennings. It was Ayuk. And then it was everybody else. Ayuk had 10 targets. Jennings had 12. Mason had the workload. Everybody else, I don't think another 49ers pass catcher had more than 3 targets. So we know where the ball's going. There's going to be opportunities there for Jennings. You got to pick him up. And quite frankly, if one or both of Kittle and Debo are out, you got to use them in a awesome matchup against the Pats because Christian Gonzalez, we might be looking at a situation where Gonzalez is going to be on Ayuk, which means Jauan Jennings, he's going to have some soft coverage. And that could be potentially be dangerous. Let's go to Darnell Mooney. And I can't believe it. Darnell Mooney is only rostered in 26% of leagues. That tells me that because he was drafted everywhere, right? Like he's one of my most rostered players in best ball and high stakes. All my leagues, I have Darnell Mooney everywhere. And his ADP shot up, right? Like it didn't go in the wrong direction. As the season went on, off season went on, Darnell Mooney was becoming more expensive. So it tells me after that week 1 outing against Pittsburgh and Cousins didn't look good and the Falcons offense didn't look good and people probably dropped Mooney. This team's going to be bad. This is why I shouldn't have drafted Mooney. He sucked with the Bears and he didn't. He had that one good year, very good player. Now you can cash in on people's mistakes if they drop Darnell Mooney in your league because back-to-back games, and this is similar like what I said about the Jets. With they didn't look good in week 1, and then Aaron Rodgers started to improve, shook the cobwebs off. Hey, all right, I made it through a game or 2 with the Achilles, and I'm good to go. I'm going to start playing like me. I feel like that's the same thing with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins looked off in week 1. I think after a few weeks, he got his confidence back. Now he looks like Captain Kirk. And that's really good for Darnell Mooney because the Falcons, they are so top-heavy with guys like Bijan, Pitts, and London. The enemy defense is going to be like, all right, I'm not worried about Darnell Mooney. I need to worry about how do I contain the 3-headed monster of Pitts, Mooney, and London. And now we are seeing Darnell Mooney absolutely pop. Week 2 against Philly, 17.8 PPR points. This past week against KC, 14.6. He has now scored a touchdown on 88 yards in that week 2 matchup. And then last Sunday night against Kansas City, 8 of 8 targets for 66 yards. In fact, he's had at least 7 targets in back-to-back games. He is clearly the number 2 receiver in this wide receiver room, and Ray McCloud is getting a lot of work. But let's face it, Darnell Mooney is the guy who's going to get the opportunities over McCloud 9 times out of 10, just a more talented player. and a more skilled player because we have seen now a regression from Ray. 7 targets in week 1, 5 in week 2, 3 in week 3. While Ray is on the decline, Mooney's on the incline. You absolutely need to pick him up. Darnell Mooney. The matchups are going to get tough. You got the Saints, you got Tampa, Carolina, Seattle. So like these aren't cake matchups, but once again, there are so many weapons here for the enemy defense to contain. Darnell Mooney could be the biggest benefactor, so you got to pick him up. Let's go start winding down. Wan'Dale Robinson available in 24% of leagues, another one of my offseason guys. And I said, there's going to be a lot of targets to be had for Wan'Dale Robinson. And Malik Neighbors living up to his name, living up to the advertisements. And I can't believe it myself because I was worried about how Daniel Jones, how is he going to support Neighbors? Well, he's doing a great job. And Neighbors is absolutely going ballistic, but there's still some left over for Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale Robinson has at least 9.8 PPR points in 3 games to open the year. He is a clear slot wide receiver. He is and this is odd. He's actually number 3 in wide receiver snaps. 171, 150 to Slayton, then 119 to Wan'Dale. But Wan'Dale is clearly out producing and out getting more opportunities than Darius Slayton. But like Wan'Dale, 11.8 PPR in week 1, 13.1 in against Cleveland in week 3. I'm not telling you this guy's going to give you 20 PPR points. I'm not telling you he's going to give you a Jauan Jennings 30, 40-point game. But if you need a high floor player, if you're dealing with a Puka or a cup injury, or if one of your tight ends, you've drafted Kelsey or Andrews, and you need somebody to put in your flex, I can't afford a 0. I can't afford a 5. I need at least 10 points out of a guy. Wan'Dale Robinson is it. He's had at least 8 targets in 2 out of the 3 games. And in the 1 game, he had 4 targets. He caught 2 of them for 18 yards and a touchdown. So he's making the most out of every opportunity given. We know he's a talented player. Injuries kind of hindered his early career showings, but I like where this Giants offense is, all things considered. And double coverage is going to go to Malik Neighbors. They're going to try to focus on him, which means there's going to be a ton of opportunities to continue to be funneled to Wan'Dale. You got to go pick him up. Let's go to Mike Williams, 24% rostered, and this is a player coming off another injury. A little bit of a slow start to the year. They're going to start opening Mike Williams up as he feels healthy, as he gets more acclimated, because he is coming off of another significant lower body injury. In terms of workload distribution, he's 3rd behind Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard, we know, good blocker. His boy is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers trusts him. But the overall talent, when it comes to, well, who's the second most talented wide receiver in New York with the Jets, it's Mike Williams. And once Mike Williams is fully healthy, I think he's going to be a big-time problem. And this is when you want to get ahead of the market on. Don't wait until Mike Williams, don't be the guy, I need to see it happen first. He's on waivers. Nobody's going to pick him up. And then Mike Williams goes because he has it in him for 115 yards and 2 scores and makes a bad defense look stupid. And it can happen at any time. And he gets the Denver Broncos this week, a familiar opponent. I get Denver has been shut down, especially the wide receivers. But I think they're going to focus Surtain on Garrett Wilson. And we could see a big game out of a supporting wideout like Mike Williams. Godwin found the end zone this past week while Evans was erased. So don't be the guy who's waiting. He's going to be there because somebody's going to pick up Mike Williams and maybe blow all their fab bucks on him. And maybe you have a hole in your wide receiver room on your fantasy team. Don't be that guy. Get ahead of the market now. If you're thinking about it, pull the trigger, sit on him. The worst thing that can happen, he doesn't do anything, and you drop him. It didn't cost you anything anyway. But this is one you want to pick up now before he is fully unleashed and Aaron Rodgers is fully unleashed and the ceiling of Mike Williams. We've seen a lot of those special games through the years with the Chargers, and it could potentially happen. I mean, look what Lazard's doing right now. He scored 3 touchdowns in 3 games. What if that shifts to Williams because it can happen, especially with the over-the-top big plays. Let's go to my only quarterback is Justin Fields. And anybody who knows me, I'm not the biggest Justin Fields guy, but starting to earn my respect. He's starting to look like a real NFL quarterback. And sometimes looking like a real NFL quarterback makes you look like not the greatest fantasy quarterback because they're two different things. Look at Goff, excellent NFL quarterback, erratic in fantasy. Justin Fields in his career has been great in fantasy, kind of sucked for the NFL. Justin Fields 3-0. He's playing fairly turnover-free football. First 2 weeks manages the Steelers to a 2-0 record, and this past game, Justin Fields played well and led the Steelers offense to another win. So Fields the starter in Pittsburgh 3-0. I don't think he's not worrying about Russell Wilson anymore. This is Justin Fields' team. And I think as he feels more comfortable, and we saw that this week, he's going to start playing like himself and playing with confidence, something I don't think he ever truly did with the Chicago Bears. First real productive fantasy outing against the Chargers, who's been playing good defense this year. 22.9 quarterback fantasy points, depending on your platform, completed 78% of his passes. In fact, he's completed over 65% of the passes in 3 straight games to open the year and over 73.9% in 2 out of the 3. Throws for 245 yards, a touchdown, and 1 pick. He also ran 6 times, not the most efficient for 6 yards, but scored a running touchdown. So, this is the field stat line where if he gives you something like this on a week-to-week basis, for what you paid for him, he's a league winner. And he wasn't drafted in a lot of spots. And he's on waivers in a lot of leagues. This is the type of guy where Justin Fields really begins to feel himself and click and, develop a rapport. They have nice weapons in Pittsburgh with Pickens and Warren. I know people hate Najee, but he's a really good chain mover and in between the tackles runner. You can also catch passes. Justin Fields, hit him now. The quarterback position's been erratic, just like the rest of fantasy football through 3 games. If you're a Patrick Mahomes fantasy manager, what the hell do I do? Have a backup plan. Justin Fields, excellent backup plan, because we know what Justin Fields can do in terms of fantasy through his years with the Bears. We saw a little bit of a glimpse of it in a winning format last week. And there's enough weapons. And Arthur Smith, say what you will, he'll scheme up some nice things for a player of Justin Fields' skill set. So he's absolutely somebody you need to roster. Now let's close out with a former teammate of Justin Fields, Cole Kmet. Anybody who knows me, I've been out on Cole Kmet. I've never really liked him, but now's the time. You got to get Cole Kmet all offseason long. Gerald Everett, Shane Waldron, Gerald Everett. And it was true. He was getting a lot of work. Everett was getting a lot of work ahead of Kmet and with the starters. We saw that in the preseason. So much so that Kmet's fantasy value, draft value plummeted. He was undrafted in some spots. Not a lot, but some. Well, that Gerald Everett experiment lasted 1 game. Obviously, week 1, Gerald Everett commanded the work. 33 snaps, 25. Then in the past 2 games, it all shifted. Kmet, more talented, more money. Week 2, 50 to 25 snap share for Kmet, 60 to 28 last week. And I even said this, and if you go back in the archives, it's not like I'm lying. Go back into last week's shows. I was telling people, get ahead of the market. I love that word. You'll hear me say it a lot. Get ahead of the market. Go pick up Cole Kmet now because he's going to eventually go off. And I said, if you look at week 2, he doubled Everett's snaps. He had 5 targets, 4 for 27. The stats aren't what I was telling people to buy. I was telling people to buy into the snap share, which means the more talented player is going to get on the field. No Keenan Allen. There's more opportunities to be had. We know Caleb's struggling. The struggling quarterback's going to lean on the tight end. And all of that gelled and popped in week 3. Cole Kmet, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 97 yards and a touchdown. And his upcoming matchups, the Rams, 28th against enemy tight ends in fantasy. Carolina 30th. I mean, these two next games could be smash spots for Cole Kmet. Hopefully you listened and you picked him up last week, because if you try to pick him up this week, and you should, it might cost you a little bit more. It might cost you fab bucks. It might cost you a high waiver priority. So I say get ahead of the market for reasons like this. But until next time, we're going to wrap up. If you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, the alert icon, so you can be notified anytime we are live to answer your questions or drop videos just like this. If you have any waiver questions, drop them in the comments. If you don't like my takes, let me know in the comments. If you don't like my hair, let me know in the comments. We'll get back to you. I'm Anthony Sabino for the Face Off Sports Network. See you later.